Hi everyone. Can everybody hear me? We're all good? We'll wait just a couple of minutes. Ariana has not entered the room yet, so hopefully she will soon. I put the link to her article that was published in NACLA on this subject, and we'll wait just a few more minutes, hopefully just a couple. I'm also going to share the screen with a little bit of data about the Cuban vote in Florida for y'all.
Carolina, ¿me oyes? Está muted. Yo no oigo nada.
Okay, do you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Ariana, can you como subir el volumen un poco?
Sí, todo el mundo dice eso.
Okay. Okay.
Espérate. ¿Y ahora? ¿Ahora?
Sí, I think that works.
No sé.
No, better now. Better now.
Okay, better now?
Okay. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Hi, Ariana. Good to see you.
Hi.
Okay, so I think let me. All right. I think oops.
Oh,
of course, if I touch your screen.
How do I how do I share a screen, or do I send you a couple of pictures to show?
Well, if we'll let Hannah.
Yes, Ariana is the co-host already, so you should be able to share your screen once Carolina stops sharing.
Right. So I just wanted to start with this, Ariana, and there's a picture that you took right here, right? That I put. If you look at,
nice.
Yeah, there you are. It's very nice, isn't it? Okay, so I think we can get started because there's a lot to talk about, and we want to leave some room for Q&A. So
wait, hi Esther. Let me say hello to my friends
Sure.
and LC.
So buenas tardes, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Carolina Caballero, and I am the Murray Stone Senior Professor of the Practice. It's a joint appointment between the Department of Spanish and Portuguese and the Stone Center for Latin American Studies. I'm also Associate Director of the Cuban and Caribbean Studies Institute at Tulane University, and I want to welcome you all to a lunchtime conversation that we're going to be having with Dr. Ariana Hernández Reguant, a cultural anthropologist who has been doing ethnographic work in South Florida, and just recently published some findings, some very timely findings about her work in Hialeah and the Cuban vote in the 2020 presidential election. So before I introduce Ariana, I just wanted to show you guys some basic statistics. That's on your screen right now, and I'll remove it in just a second. This information is from the New York Times. It's from the Pew Research Institute, and from a podcast that was made through Latino USA called The Myth of the Latino Vote. 2018, 1.4 million eligible Cuban voters nationwide. 65% of them live in Florida. 58% either are affiliated or lean Republican, 28% Democrat. And then we have some stats for the 2016 and 2020 election. So 54% of Cubans voted for Trump in 2016, 35% of Latinos overall in Florida, and 28% nationwide. In 2016, 44% for Clinton. And in 2020, these are kind of the early numbers. 56% of the Cubans voted for Trump. 46% of Latinos overall in Florida voted for Trump, and 27% nationwide. 31% of Cubans voted for Biden. So in some ways, we're going to be focusing on Cubans today because that's what Ariana wrote about. I'm also both professionally and personally invested in talking about Cubans. But I think also part of the story is this switch from in 2016, 35% Latinos overall in Florida to 46%. And I think what Ariana's research actually gets to that as well, even though we'll be focusing on the Cuban vote. So it's no surprise to anybody, I think, that the Cuban community voted Republican. They lean Republican, they vote Republican. But I think what is surprising about this election and what everybody has been talking about in this election is the fact that a group of Cubans, right? The Trump seemed to appeal to a vast generation, Cubans by generation, right? We're talking about the older exiles to young, and immigration groups, right, to recent arrivals as well. And that's surprising because just a few years ago, in 2014, 2015, these were groups that were heading Democrat, that were heading left. And according to the FIU Cuba poll, one that was published just recently, they started to move right again. So Ariana worked on, a lot of people have been asking, what is it about Trump? What is about his messaging that made this happen? And what Ariana kind of tapped into is a set of unfulfilled desires in the Cuban American population that made these inroads possible. So let me introduce Ariana. Ariana is visiting research assistant professor of the Cuban and Caribbean Studies Institute at Tulane University. She's a cultural anthropologist. She studies the public expression of social and political ideologies, including ideologies of race, within institutions and social contexts of interpretation. She has spent several years in Cuba, particularly in the 1990s, and did fieldwork in state media outlets, recording studios and advertising agencies, looking at the commercialization of culture and the impact on socialist governance. She is the author-editor of the book Cuba in the Special Period, Culture and Ideology in the 1990s. It was published in 2009. She has also since then published in several other anthologies and other non-print venues on Cuba and Cuban Americans. Lately, she's been doing research in Miami on Spanish language media and performance of race and citizenship and notions of freedom among Cuban immigrants, particularly in Hialeah. And this is where this article kind of comes in that she published in NACLA. And also Ariana is founder and moderator of the International Network of Cuban Scholars known as Ethno-Cuba. It's a Facebook group that currently has 875 members as of 30 minutes ago. And since 2015, she's the editor-in-chief of Cuba Counterpoints, public scholarship webzine on Cuban and Cuban American affairs, culture, and the arts. So the plan today is, so welcome Ariana, and the plan today is for us just to discuss briefly for about 20-25 minutes her findings in this article, and then we want to open this up to Q&A, and in the process, please put your Q&A in the chat, and we can refer to it while we're discussing it or once we're done. So Ariana, welcome.
I will add a statistics that I just saw, and I'm gonna try. I don't know if sharing screen is gonna work because I have two screens. So let's see. Let's see. Okay, hold on. I'll share this one.
Oh, it's working.
Okay, but I don't see you now. Okay, so do you see, this is Debbie Murkersell Powell. She was the congresswoman for District 26. That's Kendall and Westchester. That's heavily Cuban as well, but also there are lots of Colombians and Venezuelans, and it stretches to the Keys. And so they're, you know, but now the Keys, they don't have that many population after the hurricanes, but it's a big district. And I just saw this on Twitter, which I had already read, but I didn't know the exact ratio. So she says, my district voted for Clinton plus 16%, and now for Trump plus 6%. So it was a 22-point swing. She lost,
Right.
as a Democrat, but this is dramatic, right? So that, you know, these sort of broad percentages that you said, they don't, you know, they don't tell the whole story of what happened here. 22 points difference.
Right. No, absolutely. In one of the podcasts I listened to, Carlos Odio, who is a pollster, said that in non-Cuban districts and precincts, that Hillary Clinton won by 70% in 2016. Biden only won by 50%. Yeah. So that huge. And so we're talking, so it's not just a Cuban thing, right? It's a generally across the board Latinx or Latino or Latin American issue that's going on in Florida. So I wanted to start, Ariana, with the first question. Tell us, how did you come about this ethnographic analysis of Hialeah? Because I know it's by accident, right?
Well, not really. You know, as Liz here knows and others, my, my sort of second project after the dissertation was an Ethnography of America Tv, which is a Spanish language television station geared at Cubans. And so I did fieldwork there. So I knew, you know, Carlos Otero, and I know all these people from the fieldwork there. And it used to be a station that was owned and directed by an Argentine family, that they were by and large Republicans, but moderates. And due to, I guess, business problems, they lost it to a Spanish company about 5-6 years ago, and the station went full Trump. You know, so I saw that, you know, I saw that change, and I also saw it on the street. So Grenier's poll didn't surprise me, because I had realized that, you know, there were all these more recent arrivals that they were going for Trump. I had noticed also the big difference on the streets, of course, from, you know, as I tell in the article 4 years ago, I wrote about it because prior to that I was, and due to the various mostly art projects that I was doing around the city of Hialeah, I was a member of a civic group that was called Que Pasa Hialeah. And this was sort of an uneventful group, you know, relatively small group of cultural producers and business owners and, you know, and civic leaders. And leading up to the past election, it kind of became the Second World War, and everybody ended up, you know, fighting with everybody, and the group disbanded before the election, you know, with the Republicans accusing the Democrats that they were using the group to advance their interest, and then, you know, the opposite. So, you know, so I saw how the divisions were increasing. And so because I happened to be friends with a woman who was in that group and who was a retired teacher, and, you know, a lovely lady who also was one of the directors of the local Republican club, I started documenting their switch from supporting Jeb Bush. Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I need to make, I all of a sudden I see random people big in my image, and I don't know how to control that. Speaker view, I don't know why. Okay, well, I don't know. So it's Heather, you are the one who's being big in the screen. So then I began to document that switch ideologically, as well as in terms of actions around the city. And then, in the past elections, there was not much movement for Trump. Like, it was the traditional Republicans voting, but there was not this effervescence for Trump that there was now. And so because of that article and other projects, I did a smaller art project on notions of freedom, and I did a small video asking people on the street what they meant by freedom last year. So that circulated, and I was approached earlier this year to do a big ethnography study among Cuban communities in various places of Dade County regarding these ideological changes. And because we already knew that, people who had come here from like 2005 onward were more Republican, the idea of the study was to find out the reasons why. So my target actually were people who had emigrated after 2000, but then the pandemic came, and that stalled. At the same time, I was also, as you mentioned, I was doing research on race relations. And so I was doing extensive interviews that I continue via Zoom, particularly of Black Cuban Republicans, because I had also been participating in another civic group, which is called the Afro-Cuban Forum, and they are mostly Republican. And so I had a sense of what was happening, but then the ethnography that I wanted to do could not be carried on. But then the opportunity to canvas came, really 1 month before the elections. And in fact, when I first came here and after that America TV research, I wanted to get to know Hialeah. And I thought, what am I going to do? How, I don't know anybody there, or not close enough. I don't have a role in the community. And it was the second Obama, election it was going to be. And so I contacted a group called Obama for America, and I volunteered to canvas, but they didn't have a presence in Hialeah. Nobody wanted to canvas for the Democrats in Hialeah. And in fact, this is a short, funny story. They ended up opening a storefront in Hialeah, Obama for America. So I went there, it's like, I'm your first volunteer. I come to volunteer. And, I talked to the guy, and he's like, at the end of the conversation, well, as a canvasser, we have these maps of the city, this and that. And he says, but why do you want to do this? And I said, well, in full disclosure, it's not really out of, political motivation. I'm an anthropologist. And he goes, oh, me too. And so, this was a recent graduate from Florida State or somewhere, and he also volunteered to go to Hialeah because he was an anthropologist. So, it was pretty funny, but I got to know the city by knocking on doors. And so this time when there was the opportunity to canvas, I contacted the Democratic Party and I said, I'll canvas. And first they sent me to Miami Gardens, and I lasted a day. I said, no, look, it's like Miami Gardens is great, but I really want to canvas in Hialeah. Well, we're not really doing Hialeah. Okay, we'll do Hialeah. So then, I did basically most of Central and Eastern Hialeah by myself. And it was quite an experience. Every day I came home with, with stories to tell and to write. And at some point I thought I would write a book of short stories. But then, I thought, no, and then by then everybody was pondering why are they voting for Trump? And then, I said, well, I have the answer because I'm the one who's talking every day, knocking every day on 300 doors. And also, it's like you look for the Democrats that are not so reliable voters, but they live in multi-generational households and they're not home. So you end up, having chats with everybody there. And then interestingly, a friend of mine, another anthropology professor, he wrote, he forwarded the article around saying, maybe we should discuss canvassing as a new social science method. So yeah, I don't know what the ethics board would think about that. But definitely, it gave me a lot of material. And then as I say in the article, and then at some point, it's like I could find patterns of, in terms of age and also in terms of how the house looked like, it's like I already knew in a blog probably what houses are what, from the signs, but also from the altars and from, and from the Halloween decorations and the flags and so on. And then also the age of the people and when they had come. And so, and then, like I said in the article, I realized that there was not one issue that was a deal breaker, or and then also that there were many people that they didn't know what party they were registered for. And they didn't know whether Trump was a Republican or a Democrat. And so that this was mostly about what Trump represented, Trump as an icon. And that also sort of came home when I first saw the video clip that Los Tres de La Habana did. I don't know, some of you might have seen it, which is, their song. But then they have Trump as a cartoon character dancing around the bottom of the screen, right? And so, so it's like this icon, this almost cartoon character that they kind of they identify with, in the sense that they see him as an everyday man that one day they could become, right? And so there was this kind of like projected identification into the future, because and now me talking, I think that to identify with Biden or even with Obama, it's very difficult, because these are very clearly very highly educated people that they talk to intellectual audiences. And so not every immigrant, having come here at the age of 40, can then go on and graduate from Harvard Law School and have all that breadth of knowledge. But Trump doesn't talk like that. Trump talks in very simple terms that people can understand. So he's like the guy that one would like with George Bush, Jr., the guy that people could see themselves, hanging out at the barbecue in the backyard with, but not Biden. So, and one example was one lady who was also actually a Biden supporter. And then she says, "Oh, I love Biden. He looks like a prince. He's like a European prince, And so in her case, she liked that. But, most people, they don't, you will never be a European prince, no matter what you do, right? But, but you could win the lottery or do some kind of a business that, that will make you rich. Like I also mentioned another anecdote in the article. So, so this was very important to me in terms of finding, the allure of Trump, like you have the Republicans that will vote Republican, but then you have more people that voted for Trump. And also, I was in principle looking for Democrats, although, the last week, out of desperation, the party also wanted to knock on independents' doors. And after 2 days, I told them that doesn't work, because the independents are Republicans. And I don't, so I've already had, it's just like, make it a bit easier on me. So, but a big number of Democrats will tell me, "Oh yeah, I'm a registered Democrat, but I'm voting for Trump," even though they voted for Daniela Levin for mayor, who's a progressive on, to the left of the Democratic Party, our new mayor. And also many people voted to increase minimum wage to $15 an hour. And that also, to me, and Liz probably can also connect with this, to the sort of the two levels of ideology, right? One sort of like the grand, the symbolic part, the grand sort of narrative that people identify with, in which you can really throw anything you want into it, right? And so I also have a picture that I wanted to share. Let's see, let me, that it also, that became clear when I saw that picture. I mean, when I saw that guy. And okay, so let me share again. And share screen. Okay, so so this was a guy that was going around the main early voting place in Hialeah, and I talked to him and I said, "But hold on, I mean, to my knowledge, Trump doesn't support the legalization of marijuana," and he says, "That's okay, I do." And so then I kind of realized that again, Trump is not a specific policy. Within Trump, there's a lot that you can do, and you can still fight for marijuana legalization and support $15 an hour, right? And so I think, in my view, this is something that that other parties should understand, that You know, you have to create this, you know, grand narrative that people will be on board. And then there's the minutia of policy that, you know, may change, or there might not be any, like in the case of Trump's health plan, you know. And that also explains, you know, like as we know, Hialeah has like among the highest rates in the United States in terms of Obamacare, you know, of Obamacare registration, and you know, and food stamps and welfare. And I guess, you know, people don't leave it as a contradiction, because what they get from Trump is not policy, is this opportunity of being, you know, of being American. And then the interesting thing too is, like, one day I realized, it's like, I haven't seen a Cuban flag in like days and days and days, whereas before there were Cuban flags in every home. They are gone, right? And so, you know, and so when I told people, well, but how about remittances? And, you know, and yes, many people were in Cuba, you know, and they could not vote. No, she's in Cuba and she's stuck because of the pandemic, so she can't come to vote. Or, you know, so people still, you know, go back and forth. But then on the other hand, you know, that, you know, for most people, and also I would say that some of the back and forth people were Democrats. That's why, you know, that's what I was asking where they were. But in a way, they're kind of ready to move on, you know. It's just like, well, yeah, we left all these people behind, but hey, you know, they've had half a century to come over to the United States. I mean, you know, what else can we do? So, you know, like, they should have come already. So, so I think that there, you know, that this is like perhaps the you know, something that marks the new generation, that they're ready to move on. You know, not like the exiles, and not also like the people from the 90s that, you know, they came due to the special period, and in a way they felt guilty about those that didn't, and they still had to help them. You know, new people are more like, you know, regular immigrants from anywhere else. You know, I did what I had to do, and you could have done it too, you know. So, so that was also something that interesting, that yes, some people care about Cuba, but then the, you know, the other thing too is that they, you know, they had internalized that Obama's reforms might have brought some, you know, better conditions for some Cubans, but they did nothing for, you know, to kick the Cuban government out. And so until Obama, one could say the embargo didn't work, but after Obama, they can say engagement didn't work. So then it doesn't matter what you do. And so, you know, so let's, you know, let's kind of like keep putting the squeeze on the Cuban government. So, you know, but, you know, but also for most people told me that that was not, you know, that was not a deal breaker, or that's not why they were voting one way or the other. So yeah, so, you know, so that was another thing that, you know, that we had a sense of early in the year, going into this possibility of an ethnographic study that will have come out at the same way as the Cuba poll, that, you know, there was a sense that, you know, Cuba policy was not as important as it had been in the past in terms of determining, you know, voting choices. I don't know what else I have.
So, Ariana, Handy Acosta had a question for you. Handy, would you like to read your question?
Hello, Hola. Well, thanks so much, Carolina. Hola, Ariana, and hello, everybody. So there are a couple things that I wanna ask, but I will go with the first one. Social media icon Alexander Otaola in Miami, and actually among many Cubans in the United States, had an impact. I don't know, in your experience, if you have met him, or what is your take with the impact, if it's overstated or underestimated, the impact that he has on his platform has, not only on Cubans, but all Cubans, let's say Cubans that doesn't have a platform, but other Cubans who has a political platform, like Eliezer Avila, etc. So that's one question. What is your opinion, and also what do you think will happen in the next 4 years with a Biden presidency? It's going to be a louder, it's going to be that is going to shift the discourse, or it will align to Trump's. And And second one, and the second
Oh,
question.
wait, no, so third. Now we go to third.
Oh, third, sorry. It's a little bit of your comments on the impact of the Black Lives Matter movement on the Cuban community, um, and what was the reaction, and what did this movement play? What role did it play on even turning more voters in favor of Trump? Because I disconnected from Facebook before a month before the elections because I couldn't handle all this discussion, daily discussion with my friends in Miami, because it was very, very yeah, it was I couldn't it was unbearable. There was a point that I said I will disconnect Facebook and see you after the elections. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, number one, Otaola. I personally think Otaola is overrated. I mean, I asked door by door, actually, do you watch Otaola? Do you listen to Otaola? And most people knew who he was. Some people had watched it now and then. Connectivity rates in Hialeah are not that high. And so I would say that still today, there are more people who watch TV than are, watching videos online. But I think that so in that sense, I think that among many people, America TV has had the same type of influence. I think that what Otaola has done, he has legitimized the discourse. It's a little bit like what Trump has done with with the Proud Boys or with certain fringe segments. I think that Otaola has given voice to what many people were thinking, but didn't want to tell out loud. And so the question is that, like he's been a leader because he has voiced up, those feelings. The other day, now and then I still watch his program. Those very long. And so you have to keep fast forwarding because there's all the entertainment stuff. But he was calling the Cubans in Cuba limosneros. He was like, enough of these limosneros, like we can't keep sending them their money. They have to shape up and solve their own stuff. This is something that nobody would have said out loud before. Limosneros. I was horrified that somebody would call, like, their relatives, something like that. And he does. And so I think that it has been the equivalent. It has making all right, to say things like that and to stress what people may be suspecting, that Trump has done more to put the Cuban government against the fence than Obama never did. And this is really, I don't think this is under dispute. It all depends on whether you want the Cuban government against the fence or not. So, so I think he has said these things out loud. To credit him for the Republican, for the increased Republican vote, I don't know if you can do that. I don't know how you could prove that, because it could also be the other way around, because more people think like that, more people watch Otaola, right? So we don't really know what's the relation between cause and consequences. But he certainly, another thing is that he hasn't transcended the, the Spanish language environment. But no doubt that he has given a big he has been a big voice for these views. So other like the more conservative people would not watch Otaola because they don't like his style. Some people mention his gender politics they felt uncomfortable with. So but I guess those people would watch America TV, which in that sense is more conservative. But but of course, no doubt that he has become a star, and Trump visited him, and then his list, his red list, or is it red list, of people that he's come up with, people that should not be welcome in Miami, so he, but like I said, can we credit him for the vote? I'm not sure I would, I would not, state that. I don't know if we can do that. The next 4 years of the Biden presidency, I can only tell you what I have heard through the grapevine in conversations with Democratic Party operatives and Biden transition team people. And what people are talking about is that, he's going to restore the remittances channels, the flights, but that they are not going to be, it's not like Obama. I don't think he's going to go to Cuba and meet with the Cuban leader so that he's going to make grand grand proclamations one way or the other. So they, you know, so sort of like the view, but you know, nobody has a crystal ball. But the impression is that, you know, he will change certain policies, but you know, he'll try to kind of lay low about it because he has nothing to win really one way or the other, right? And then the last one, the impact of the Black Lives, you know, this is a very important question that many people ask about. Again, I don't think this is one issue that switch a vote. I don't think there was a Democrat out there that said, wow, now I'm voting for Trump, you know, from seeing these people on the street. I don't think that happened, but law and order was mentioned, particularly by older people, because also the law and order discourse, it's kind of like an old-fashioned discourse. And so even the, you know, the younger, you know, I don't know about you friends, but, you know, it's younger people, law and order. I mean, you know, it's not a big thing. But no doubt people did not identify with, you know, with the Black Lives Matter movement. And, you know, and I asked directly to some of these, you know, Afro-Cuban forum people, and they will go off on sort of tangents. Yes, it's an American problem. We didn't have that problem in Cuba, you know, and there's no solidarity. I can tell you that, you know, it's like there is no solidarity. There's a rejection of the Latinx discourse. And also from, you know, other work that I did before on blackface on television. And then, yeah, so I'm remembering another thing before I go to that. There's a skit that the Beachy Boys did, I don't know, like 2 months ago or something. And they are discussing something similar. And so one of them, who is mulatto, we would say, you know, in the Cuban context, you know, one tells him, hey, negro, ¿qué tú piensas de esto? And he says, hey, chico, yo no soy negro, yo soy cubano, right? And when I asked, you know, some of the Black Cubans that I interviewed as to why they vote for Trump, one told me, he's like, no, you don't understand. We don't vote Black, we vote Cuban, right? And so this is, you know, this is recurrent. But anyway, there was this skit a few years ago in America TV, which was called Los Asaltantes, the Assailants. And so it was the story of this Cuban couple that they just had come from Cuba. They had a Black child, they were white. And so there were always accusations that the child was not the father's, but the father didn't want to believe that wasn't his. And so, you know, like he pretended not to see race. But they were doing really poorly. Their businesses had fallen through, they had no job. And so what, you know, so they go to the welfare office to apply for food stamps, and everybody in the welfare office, workers and everybody waiting, they're all Black. So what do? And they are at the end of the line. And they are like, you know, we're Cuban, we can't be like the last ones on the line here to request this. So they take guns out and they stick up everybody and they rob them all and they run with the money. And every episode is them, you know, assaulting an institution. Sometimes it's a school, it can be the emergency room where they go from somewhere. And so they're always at the back of the line, and then they get angry. And so they get the gun out, and then they get everybody's monies and IDs and run away. So, you know, the show is really about how they are going downward. It's like downward. Their mobility is going so down that even their next generation is no longer white, is Black, right? And they are there down with all the Black people who are on welfare. And they are really, you know, two paths to America. You know, you're an immigrant, and there are two paths to American citizenship. One is the white path, which is the path of business and upward mobility. And the other one is the Black path, which is the one of dependency, welfare, and, you know, and really, you know, being stuck in the hole, like not going anywhere, but, you know, forever dependent on help. And this is not a path that they want to follow. And so forcing, you know, people into categories, you know, categories that activists have come up because they are categories of solidarity for struggle for new immigrants. These are categories that they don't want to be associated with because they see them as of going downward mobility. They're, you know, they are categories that to them signal failure. So they don't want to be associated with that. And this means that no soy negro, soy cubano, and that there is no solidarity with the plight of African Americans. Among activists, yes, but among the, and I also heard that all over again, all over, like, no, we don't want to be on welfare, what the Democrats want to, expand welfare, and that's, that's not going to go anywhere, because once you get into that hole, you never come out, right? So, yeah, so I think that they see it as a path of downward mobility, and it's epitomized by inner city people who have been there for generations, and that they are, they have a very hard time coming out of that, and that's what they don't want. So I think that's where it's coming, it's like they see the riots, they don't like the riots. Some can understand that people have grievances and can understand about police violence, but they also see it as an American problem that has been caused and perpetuated by policies that therefore they reject. And of course, I'm simplifying this and I'm making a narrative out of a bunch of comments and observations. But has that caused them, has that flipped votes? I don't know. I can't say. Maybe it has flipped some votes, but it's not the massive. What flips votes, it's a rejection of that, of that sort of model for belonging in America, even as many of them are on food stamps and on welfare and not, with homestead exemptions and paying zero taxes on their homes and so on.
Well, I mean, also that's the appeal of Trump, right? Because he completely rejects that discourse from the very beginning, right? The 1619 Project saying like, oh, America's great. We don't even have to worry about any of this. I'm going to do the 1776 Project and let's make America, let's not even talk about those things. So that's part of his appeal, I think, as well, not having to deal with that, not having to think about that, not having to feel bad about that or being introspective about that. And I don't know, and Cubans historically have never wanted to be put into that category to begin with.
But also, I think that seeing people on the streets protesting, they think of, particularly the exiles more than the younger people, right? But, they think of revolution, and they don't want to have anything to do with that, right? And I went to marches, and I actually was in the one where first somebody opened up a big Che flag, which I took pictures of, and they did it again at the second demonstration, and then somebody from the press snapped the picture, and then everybody was horrified. See, they are Marxists. But I think that it was a Haitian group actually, and they did it as a provocation, not not because they are or they aren't Marxist, but I think that it was a conscious provocation, like, like you've censored this discourse for so long in this city, so now you have to put up with it.
Ariana, we have several questions here in the chat. Raleigh Crace is talking about the difference between white Trump voters and Cuban Trump voters. Is there a difference? And I don't know if Raleigh, are you here? Oh yeah, Raleigh, did you want to ask your question?
Sure. So I guess my question kind of is along the lines of that idea of the grand narrative and political persona being of more value to Cuban Trump voters, you've argued, than a specific policy platforms. Do you think that is a trend that could carry over to white Trump voters, especially those from more rural areas?
I can't really say. I mean, the white Anglo population of South Florida, I think it's just 15%. So now and then you run into one. But what I've read about about rural Trump voters and also people in the industrial belt is that they really have genuine grievances about their jobs, about their wages. I didn't really see this here, except a few people that mentioned how the jobs had left Hialeah for China. But then they had found eventually other jobs, or they had started businesses. So, so I think that those types of labor grievances that you see in places like Ohio and the whole industrial belt, I haven't seen that here. There is a great study of Southern Louisiana, actually. You probably know it. I forgot right now the name of the author. It's a wonderful ethnography of rural Louisiana and Trump voters. And the author talks about the contradiction of how people see the environmental devastation. And what all these companies did there, these chemical companies along the river, along the Mississippi River, but they're still, they're still voting for Trump. And so she attributes it partly to religion, partly to fear of change, and she tries to understand the contradictions between the environmental activism that some are joining, and and supporting the Republican Party. And I think, again, as we see in many places, I think it's also a failure of, in the sense of the Democratic Party, of, creating sort of another type of discourse that people, can embrace, and where these sort of, I guess that's what Bernie Sanders tried to do regarding, particularly the industrial belt. And we saw that some that voted for Sanders in the primary 4 years ago, they then voted for, didn't vote for Clinton. They voted for Trump. So, so it might be different in their case from immigrants. And also another thing is that I want to differentiate between immigrants, meaning the people that, that we jumped into the new place and tried to make the best out of it and want to look forward, from the people who were born here and have a different entitlement to, to life in this country and to expectations and so on, right? So, there were people, I have a couple of pictures there of people like Cubans going to vote, and with a T-shirt that said "Native U.S." Native because he was born here, right? So it's different from the parents that were born in Cuba. So I really think that this is, when people say, on the one hand, Trump voters, on the other hand, Latinos as a community, and then if you differentiate that, you want to differentiate Venezuelans from Cubans from Argentinians. But I really think that the focus is immigration and the immigrant experience, and what you bring, and also the ideas that you bring here. Another issue that has come up, it came up in a Zoom that we did with On Cuba, and where there were also Cubans there, and about the why these people they come from Cuba and they embrace this, and I realized that there was a level of civic sort of culture and engagement that was expected from people that came of age during the breakdown or after the breakdown of the socialist and revolutionary institutions. So so people, there was a complete breakdown of primary education in Cuba, of the health system. And so for some reasons, just because they are Cuban, you are expecting them to have this idea that socialized medicine is good, when in their experience it's really bad. So we are also placing expectations in immigrants just because they are Cubans and because our ideas of what Cuban means, and really there, and also there's where it comes the discourse of socialism, and then you realize everybody's trying to understand why has it become the boogeyman. And I've been asking in the last couple of weeks, I've been asking random people that that they are Cuban and on the right. What do you understand by socialism? Tell me 3 key words that come to mind. And the first one that they say is hambre. Socialismo, hambre. Socialismo, represión. Socialismo, Cuba. Socialismo, Maduro. It's like nobody tells you fair taxation, which is what I would say. Fair taxation. Socialized medicine, free college. Solidarity program, civic participation. No, hambre. And one guy, I pressed him, what do you mean hambre? You've been here since 1989, what hambre? And then he said, well, it's true, I didn't live the special period. So, so I guess other people have more claim to saying hambre than I do, but it's what came to mind. So,
Okay.
so there are, so it's all, it's all things that, that we need to sort of, understand before, projecting.
Right. Absolutely. And Ariana, we have another Jimmy. Are you here? Do you want to ask your question? Jimmy Huck?
Sure. Yeah, I'm here.
Jimmy.
I'm here. And hi, Ariana. It's good to see you.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Good
sharing all these.
Good to hear you because I don't see you.
Oh, let me put my video on.
Oh, okay.
Here I
Hey,
am.
look at you. So
Yeah.
young.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that. Getting up there. Well, I mean, you've touched on, my question in a number of ways since I posted it, but I'm just curious, maybe if you can more specifically elaborate on it a little bit more. I don't know that much about the subject, so it's good to learn more. But, we've all been hearing from the moment of the election that, the Trump campaign pounded this idea of socialism and communism, and that's what made the difference. But then I was struck when you showed some of the pictures and the examples of people who were supportive of $15 an hour minimum wage, or who really were supportive of other progressive policy positions, still voting for Trump. It made me wonder if they really aren't interested in socialism as a policy concern, or really any policy concerns. They just are voting for the guy who's very charismatic and who has celebrity status. And I'm wondering if that's a good read on the situation. So that's basically what my comment is. Low information voters opt for celebrity over policy, or is there really a policy consideration that accounts for the increase in support for Trump?
There is not one specific policy. Some people have one specific policy, but it's different from the one of the neighbor. So they are specific policies. It's not like they are not. But they are often contradictory, like the guy who supports marijuana legalization, and they can vote for Trump, but that, so Trump, I think, carried the down ballot races for the Republicans, but at the same time, some Trump people had to vote for Daniela Levin, otherwise we would not have her. And in fact, in Hialeah, she had to get votes from Republicans. Bobo won, but still she got a number of votes that she could not have gotten it if Republicans had not voted for her. So, so Trump, and I think it's something that I read this morning that was being discussed in Georgia in relation with the two Senate races, which is that they cannot take the Trump vote for granted, because Trump voters, they are the Republican voters and they are the Trump voters, and they overlap, but they are not the same people. And so, so it's not for sure that all the Trump voters will go and vote for the Republican senators. It's not clear at all that they even will get off the couch and go to vote. And so I think that here is the same. People have issues. Some people care about Cuba. Some people care about immigration, but nobody cares that much, like I kept hearing, no hay cama para tanta gente. El que tenía que llegar ya vino, y si no han venido hasta ahora, oye, ya, ¿hasta cuándo? Like stuff like that. And so, but it was varied. Like all the people will tell you sometimes about, law and order. Well, some people were like, particularly older people, defund the police, it's like, like it will freak them out. But then younger people have a different discourse, like when Los Tres de La Habana went to the police station to report that they were being harassed by Democrats, the police officer was a Democrat and basically told them to get out of there. And so they made a video really angry, against the police. So, so it's, I guess it's more nuanced, the feelings that people have toward the police. So I would say that there isn't one single thing. There are a bunch of policies, but they are not the same ones for everybody. So it's more, it's the power of nationalism, the power of nationalism that, that we've known since the 19th century. And I think that, from the special period onwards, Cuba didn't offer that to people, right? So in the 60s and 70s, the population was very polarized and many people had to leave the country. But, the ones who stayed, they got that, and but then, so there was that sort of framework to be part of the masses. But in some cases, the mob, then after the special period, no, there wasn't, like as as I wrote, and to some extent Liz too, right? There was this, they didn't have to believe on anything. There was, on the contrary, like, most people didn't believe in anything that came out of the mouth of the Cuban government. So there were, so in a way, I think that Trump, and not even 4 years ago, but now, it has that's what it has offered them. It has, it has legitimized them taking flags and going out on the street and, and driving around honking and, what also sports teams offer.
Yeah, that's kind of idea, these unapologetic nationalism, right? This kind of even of aggressive nationalism.
Right.
In a
and
way.
This is why the Cuban flags are nowhere to be found.
Right.
I mean,
right.
Maybe they'll come back, but during the
right. And something also interesting that I read is in an article that Ariana sent me in the New Yorker, there was talking about a Democrat who tried to kind of counter the Otaola misinformation campaign with his own YouTube channel, but his talks would be like, why we should consider supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, and he's saying like, the Democrats don't make things easy, right? While the Trump and the Republican Party make things very easy, right? You don't have to self-reflect on anything, right? You just be proud of being an American and be proud of making lots of money no matter how you do it. And even if it's lying and cheating, right? And that's what, in some ways,
right.
I think when you talked about the structure of feeling, Ariana, that's what's attractive, this pathway to citizenship, to belonging, to becoming American.
Right.
That they can be attracted to. And so Lauren,
the power of individualism.
Right, exactly.
Right? So, the freedom video that I did, that I think you might have seen, otherwise I'll send it to you. It was about this idea of freedom from, like, I asked on the street to people in Hialeah, in front of the Hialeah City Hall, what does freedom mean to you? And the answers were always freedom from, not freedom to. So, so that was very interesting. So, so it's also the idea of unregulated business. So, they might not want, they might realize that the environment is being polluted, but then in principle, they don't agree with the government coming and regulating whether you can throw your, your trash on the canal or not,
Right.
There was, when I did the video, there was one man that was coming out of City Hall, an older man, and I asked him, what does freedom mean to you? You can see it on the video, I'll send it to you. And he was like, how do you know? It's like, I know what? And he says that I was just released from prison. I didn't know that. Why were you in prison? And he said, por vender aguacates. Like, what do you mean por vender aguacates? And then he said he was in the street corner selling aguacates, and the police came and told him, where's your permit to sell aguacates? And he said he didn't have a permit. So they threw him in jail for like 3 days. And this was like a gross injustice. And, everybody who came around agreed that it was like horribly unjust. And you should not need a permit to sell aguacates, right? And so this is an example of government interference. And so they, Trump also has sort of validated, this idea that you should be able to do business as you see fit, and nobody should tell you how to run your business, And then the issue of property is also, it's another whole kind of worms that it's really important, the property citizen, and then within your property, you are a king, right? And so just by owning property, it's a goal, because that also gives you, full membership.
Right.
Into
also freedom from, right? Instead of freedom to.
Right.
And then Lauren Pena, did you want to read your question?
Yes. Hi, Ariana. Thank you for your research. I really appreciate it. As a Cuban, I'm glad somebody is like actually researching the community in that sense. My question is, did you notice any difference between female and male voters in terms of support for Trump in the Cuban American community? And because what I have seen is that in a lot of the Cubans and Cuban Americans that I know, the majority of the Trump supporters were male rather than female. And so if you also notice that trend in your research, and if you think that the idea of this figure of a macho very, dictator behavior president was very compelling for the male voters. Did you notice that? Or you notice something else in terms of male voters and female voters? And thank you for your presentation.
I can only speak anecdotally because I honestly didn't really register that. But I saw the same fascination with both female and male. And so, I think the lines outside the library, they were both men and women with signs. I did not see the difference. Honestly, I knocked on lots of women who were like, no, we vote for Trump. And in fact, it was the man was the Democrat and the woman was like, no, I vote for Trump. I did notice elderly women that it is somebody else who fills their ballot. And I saw that enough that it worried me. So, like a woman says, oh, I already voted. And I said, oh, you voted on the mail? She said, yeah, my daughter took care of it. Well, what do you mean? My son. What do you mean your son? It's like, yeah, he filled it out and sent it. And I said, is your son a Democrat? And she's like, no, he's a Republican. And I'm like, lady, and you trust your son? And it's like, well, he's my son. Like, but he's a Republican. And he filled your ballot. And she's like, oh, maybe I should ask him if he really voted for Biden. And there were like another lady who was bedbound, that was kind of funny because I knock on her door and she lets, come in. And I'm like, no, I'm not coming in. Please come in. And I push the door, keep coming, I'm in bed. And I'm like, oh my God. And she's like, I'm ill. I'm thinking, maybe she has the coronavirus. But the woman had just been out of surgery for her eyes. And I said, well, I was coming to tell you if you were going to go to vote, but I see that you're not going. And she's like, oh, no. Every day the county sends a man to help me. And he filled my vote and filled it out. And I said, did you see what? But you can't see, you cannot see what he wrote on the ballot. And she was like, no, but I told him. And said, how do you know do you know him? No. So, and so this was like every day I got a couple of people, women, that somebody else, their son, their brother, their neighbor, their helper, did their ballot. And so, so I'm thinking to myself, maybe there should be, we need nonprofit organizations that, not only they have voter registration drives, but that maybe help people help themselves with the ballot so that there's less of this of other people filling the ballot. But anyway, like I didn't, I don't have any statistics in terms of gender support one way or the other. There were women that they, when they talked about Trump, they all of a sudden they got all coquettish, oh, I like him. He's so attractive. so there were some that would say that, but I don't have any statistic. Then Anna was asking about the pandemic. So you mean if they said something about the virus or something like that? No, not a thing. And and I was wearing the mask, and I could also nada. I could tell also if the person who opened the door was a Democrat or a Republican, because if they were a Democrat, it took longer to open the door, and they came with a mask. Whereas if they were, in other cases, they didn't use a mask. But no, they did not. So the issue of health and the pandemic, and like I asked a couple of people, and they were like, given the circumstances, anybody would have done the same. Look at Europe. Nobody look at Spain. Nobody knows what they are doing. It's very easy to say, I will do this, that, or the other when you're not in the situation. And he did the best he could. And and then there were like some people with like the China virus conspiracy. But no, that was not an issue that they really, that they swayed them. One man asked me, hey, I'm glad you're here. Can you tell me when I'm gonna get my Medicare card? I honestly don't know. So, so I saw that there is here in South Florida, like a dire need for a nonprofit infrastructure that helps people. Because, people are lost. They don't know where to go, and they don't know how to fill the ballot. I mean, I did help people fill their ballot, but I said, you have to fill it out yourself, and you sign it, and all I can do is to explain to you the amendments and the referendums, because also they are asking ways, But then when it came to the minimum wage, do you want it that it's a minimum of $15 an hour? Yes. That was like a no-brainer.
Ariana, Ted has a question that's also a little bit to do with the one, let's see, that Lauren asked. Ted, did you want to ask your question? Well, he's talking about the similarities between Trump and Castro.
I'm sorry,
go ahead.
I'm here. Sorry, I forgot my mute button, as we all do. Yes, Ariana, fabulous work, and I think it's important to take this thing seriously and not just dismiss these voters for, simple reasons. So I think what you're doing is fascinating and important. As you may remember, a couple of weeks ago when I was working on the hotline for Biden, it was a Democratic hotline, so I had a biased sample. But there was this one Balsera that I spoke to, and she kind of said exactly what I hoped she would without my prompting her, about how she could never vote for Trump and he could never win because that's the country that she left behind, and she found him revolting because she fled a dictator and she recognized in him that characteristic, right? And so my question for you is this: whenever I've gotten into debates with Cuban Trump supporters, some of whom I have as friends on Facebook, I have made that argument or comparison. It actually seems to me that maybe Chavez would be a better one, but I use the Castro one because it's more close to home. And your research or in your discussions, did that issue of his authoritarian, populist, anti-democratic tendencies or characteristics come up as a red flag, or were they just simply dismissed?
No, I know you had mentioned that, and this is an argument that Democrats have tried to do, and like the Cubans for Biden have made that argument. That's nothing that I didn't hear that, and I don't think that's an argument that flies to compare Trump with Chavez or with Maduro or with Fidel or Stalin or anybody like that. That doesn't fly. It's viewed as ridiculous. So although, some Democrats have made that point, but they have made that point hoping to persuade others, I don't think it has succeeded at all. They don't see that. I mean, they see him as a strong man, but but really far from, it's more, I was thinking about another friend who faithfully listens to La Poderosa every day for hours, which is an AM station that very much pro-Trump. He was telling me that there was a call-in that people were saying, yeah, before the election, we want Trump again for another 4 years, and then hopefully for 4 more years. And then maybe we can have Ivanka for more years. And then Don Jr. for 4 more years. And then I was saying, but that's not democracy, but then when it's a royalty. And then I realized is that, that's it's equivalent of a royal family. Like you don't keep the royalty in Spain because of their particular policy views, right? It's sort of like a bigger overarching structure. So like nobody will tell you that Príncipe Felipe is like Maduro. I mean, like some people might want to make that argument at some point, but I don't think it's gonna fly. So it's the same thing, It's like they see him as this, as this figurehead that represents America, and he has to be strong and and say whatever and attack people. But then at the same time, they feel like with him, the government and the state is off your hair because they are not going after you if you pollute the river or something, or with regulations. So we have talked about it among, them in Democratic Party circles. And I don't think that flies. I don't think that's going to persuade anybody.
Would it be inaccurate to say, well, maybe that just shows that they don't really mind authoritarianism, they just mind, izquierdismo, or, leftist policies, or so it's not a question of being against authoritarianism or dictatorship. It's more a question of ideology, and they don't have a problem with authoritarianism.
Right, and also remember, authoritarianism is different from totalitarianism. And so, so yes, you have this guy who is an authoritarian, but that's his personality. And some people would say, he has a horrible personality, but, that's immaterial. Or some people would say, some people who were religious, that's between him and God, when he dies, he'll have to account for that. But, I don't, I realize that he's a flawed individual. Or even women saying, some women fascinated with him, and others saying, it's like, he's pretty awful as a person. But that's not, that's not why I vote for him. So, and also some people, when they were saying to me too, like, yeah, 4 more years of Trump and 4 more years of Trump. And then I would say, but that's not democracy. Democracy is like 4 years this one, 4 years the other one. It's like we switch back and forth. That's how it is. And they were kind of puzzled about it. It's like, if you want the same guy for 12 years, then you don't want a democracy. They were, they had not, I guess they had not looked at it that way. But yeah, no, they never saw him as the left at all, And then, and some people were just confused. Like, I have also another funny anecdote of some people I took the portrait there in the Hialeah library, that the guy says, oh, where are you from? From Spain. Oh, Spaniards. They're all communists. You Spaniards are all communists. I'm like, no, not really, And then he says, I guess you haven't forgotten lo mal que se vivía con Franco. And I'm like, but Franco wasn't a communist. And it's like, no. He thought Franco was a communist. And so it's just like, there was a lot of confusion regarding, political culture, I would say.
And Ariana, we have a question from Tomás Montoya González. Tomás, did you want to read your question?
Todos mis amigos.
Lo siento.
Hola, Tomás.
Hola, un momento que estoy, I'm sorry, I'm taking care of my kid. Babysitter is not here, and it's a disaster here. Okay, hi.
Hi.
My question is related with the Cubans as a race,
As a what?
as a superior
As a
race. And if you ask them about that, about if they see them as a Latins or white or black or whatever, or because I think it's important in order to understand the desire to vote as a group, particular group, not as a Latins or whatever. And this is my question.
I don't think, like I said earlier, I think that young America-born progressive people identify as Latino, Latinx. I think that some immigrants do, but most not necessarily. The issue of race, as we know, most people identify as white, and even people who are in the U.S. considered brown. But that's not only Cubans. The man I was, for the day of the election, I was in the voter protection team and at the Hialeah library, and it was me and a man from Nicaragua that, like phenotypically, he looks mixed indigenous. And at some point, he referred to himself as a white man. So I don't think that this is only the Cubans. Yeah, so I have another, and this is all anecdotes. I have another friend who might be listening here that she called me one day because she was invited to something as a woman of color, and she calls me and she says like, Ariana, do you think I'm a woman of color? And so we kind of laughed about that, and I was like, well, I would not have thought so, but I guess maybe. So there isn't, there is not, if there's a race, of course there is a desire for whiteness, but I think that this is also, I think it's us academics and intellectuals sort of spelling it out rather than something that people will tell you just like that, right? So, there's nobody that would say, hey, I have a consciousness of whiteness, it's not really like that. But, but I think that when you start talking to people or observing their interactions and opinions about people of other races, then is when you can infer that they consider themselves to be, part of a certain group and not of another. There were some people, as going back to what we were saying before, there were some people that they were talking about, welfare and Black people, and they say they have no money, but then you see them in the grocery store and they have all these jewels. So clearly they don't need the the help, and but the same as other people saying, I don't want to pay for other people's health insurance. Everybody should pay for their own. But I think, I think that the Latino, Latinx, there was an article in the New York Times, which I still need to send Carolina the other day, that was written by a Berkeley faculty person. And he had done focus groups. It was really good. So I'll send it to several of you because it has interesting data that hasn't been published elsewhere because it was his own focus groups. And so he says in the article how, there's no, what I also say, there's no such thing as a Latino community. This is in this category, many people have been lumped, but then there's also the consideration of like whether in the second generation, these groups are going to behave as Irish and Italians, 100 years ago, that were not part of like the white, the white majority, but then eventually they became accepted as such. And interestingly, the editor of the op-ed section had not read the article because it entitled the article about views on the Latino community, when the article really concluded that we should not talk about Latino community. And I think that it's an activist category, it's a scholarly category, but some people have claimed it, but mostly second generation. So I saw a spike at the beginning of the Trump presidency when he said that Mexicans were racist. Then there were people saying we are all Latinos, that Mexicans were rapists. And then people said we're all Latinos, he's insulting all Latinos. But that kind of faded away. There is not much there's not much talk of we are all Latinos. I think that people continue to see themselves as their national origin, and for me, immigration status, it's really the most important, I see, category of difference.
I also think the echo chamber that is South Florida, right? And I find growing up Cuban American in the state of Georgia, my attitude towards my Cuban American identity and my Latinx identity or Latina identity is very different from my cousins that were born and raised in Miami. Right.
And then you see here, there was a conference at the PAM Museum a couple of years ago on Latino, Latinx and art and culture and so on. And it was interesting that the foremost proponents of the category were people who had moved here from New York. So people obviously that, and that had been obviously members of university campuses and so on.
And Ariana, I mean, I think we're going to wrap up right now, but I knew you wanted to talk about, and I want to talk about a little bit about this article in NACLA. We talked about how, I gave it to my students in my introduction to Latinx studies. I'm grading right now response papers, and over half the students quoted from your article, talking about several different options, several different ideas that you presented there in a very kind of relatable way. And I want to talk a little bit about your idea, this idea of public scholarship that you're a proponent of. Basically, Cuba Counterpoints was born of this idea of public scholarship on Cuba. And so if you could tell us a little bit about that to kind of to finish this out.
Well, I think that's like for a whole other session that I think that we should do, you know, on writing for the public, because, you know, like no academic article that I can write will have as much exposure as this one thing. Like I've been called by the New York Times, by radio stations, I mean, you name it, you know, all sorts of Zooms, people, some ambassador in Washington. I mean, you know, so I think that it is something that, you know, that I've always said, I always said that, and Anna knows that. I think that perhaps Cuba Counterpoints was very circumscribed on Cuba, and so we were really at the whim of US-Cuba policy for access and for publication. But I think that these types of publications go much farther, and I actually think that students should be trained in this kind of writing, because, you know, for one, not everybody will go for tenure review one day, but also I think that this should be taken into consideration, because the impact that you have in society, it's a lot more important than anything that you do within your institution in the long scheme of things, right? And so being able to convey theory, I was telling you, and so that the others know, that when I wrote about the pomp of the state and everything, I went to my shelf and I reread Negara of Clifford Geertz, which is one of my favorite political ethnographies of all times. And at some point, I quoted, I said, as Geertz will have it or something. And a friend who read the article before I sent it said, no, take that out, who cares what Geertz said? And I said, well, but I have to give credit to Geertz. Like, no, that's already common sense. And so, you know, the ideas are there. Like, you can't write articles like that if you don't have a theory background. So the key is to, you know, to have that background, and that also gives you the outlook and the choice of the things you look at, but you communicate them to the public and the public listens. And I really think that our mission, that should be a lot of our missions as scholars, you know, in the classroom, but then there's the whole world outside the classroom that we, you know, that we can also have a voice there. And I think it's a genre of writing that it's not being taught, perhaps in journalism schools, but they don't have the theory background, right? And so they write about a different thing every day, and we don't. We tend to write about the same thing for years. So I don't know. So I just want to make a call for, you know, for nurturing that, perhaps for coming up with something that, you know, that transcends Cuba Counterpoints, or for projects that involve, you know, this kind of writing, op-ed training, you know, this kind of thing. I think it is important. And I think that also there is more consciousness of that, because, you know, I think that Cuba Counterpoints came before many academic publications now in anthropology and in social sciences that try to reach the public. And so, you know, I think that there's more reception, you know, now for that kind of thing, and more outlets, and you know, and more possibilities. You know, I think that we need to do that. I think that all of us, we need to do that.
Great, Ariana. Thank you very, very much. Thanks everybody for attending our talk. It's been great and wonderful. Ariana, dale,
thank you for
continue with everything.
me, and we'll continue talking, and great to see Anna, and I also saw Grete somewhere, and of course Tomas and Ted and Elsie and so many great friends. So thank you.
Okay, Ariana, thank you.
Okay, all right, bye.
Thanks everybody. Be safe.